Despite it being a bright, sunny day, the wind had a keen edge. Gusts of cold air, like whispering thieves, rhythmically drifted over the countryside and stole any warmth that the rays may have produced. In response to one particular icy blast, Emily Pritchard shivered and pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders. She was still the right side of 60 years of age, but her painfully thin body constantly struggled to retain anything like a comfortable body temperature. That is not to say that Emily was at all frail. She was an energetic lady, and her level of fitness, from years of cycling, would put many younger women to shame. However, she did feel the cold. She was frequently cold, and often lonely. Emily was a widow. Her husband had been killed in a war, and she had never remarried. For many years she had lived alone, but, as the secretary of a local high school, she was kept reasonably busy, and looking after the garden of her secluded cottage kept her fully occupied in her spare time. She sighed. She had to admit the flowers were lovely. However, like so many pretty things, they were becoming rather unruly, and needed a firm hand to bring them under control. Emily very much believed in the use of a firm hand when it was called for, as many disrespectful children at her school had learned to their cost. The boys and girls knew that it was best behaviour only when Mrs. Pritchard was on the prowl. Her quick, deft hands worked the secateurs with surgical precision as she clipped and pruned. After half an hour or so, she paused and straightened up for a minute to ease her back. It was then that she heard the sound of a motorbike, approaching in the distance. As her cottage was the only dwelling for some miles, she surmised she was about to receive a visitor. Hands on hips, Emily watched as the Triumph motorcycle of Berkshire Constabulary pulled up outside the wicker gate that led into her garden. She had a good guess as to which policeman likely to be visiting her, but, even so, her heart missed a beat as she recognised the rider to be PC Fred Weston. Fred was a special friend. The officer killed his engine and dismounted, swinging his leg across the seat of the machine in a movement so entirely masculine that Emily could only approve. Having effortlessly hoisted the heavy machine onto its centre stand, the powerfully built policeman slowly took off his white-backed leather gauntlets and placed them, fingers outwards, on the tank of his bike just in front of the radio handset. He then removed his black, corker crash helmet with the word police emblazoned across its front. He gently placed the helmet into the crook of the handlebars, on top of the gloves. Emily was no stranger to police procedure, and knew what to expect next. She was aware Fred wouldn't even acknowledge her until he'd checked in with his control room a few miles away at constabulary headquarters. The radio on the 650cc Speed Twin was located behind the wide leather rider's seat. The set's telephone-like handset, and other controls, however, were mounted on top of the petrol tank. There was a small switch that, in one position, permitted the operator to use the handset discreetly like a telephone, whilst in the other position, it switched on a loudspeaker that, in theory at least, permitted the rider to hear whilst travelling along the road. Fred flicked the switch to the private setting and spoke briefly into the handset, telling his controller, in his slow, broad Berkshire accent, that he was engaged on crime inquiries and would be off the air for some time. He concluded by saying, "You can get me on Brompton 317 if required." "Thanks, Fred," came the reply from the operator. "Give us a shout when you're back on the air, just so we know you're okay." Although he possessed incredibly quick reflexes, Fred routinely did nothing in a hurry. For him, everything had to be done right, and rushing things meant mistakes could be made. He switched off the radio, secured the motorcycle, then, finally satisfied, he made his way through the gate and over towards Emily, who by now had grown tired of watching him and had gone back to tending her flowers. "Hello, stranger," she said over her shoulder. Then, sarcastically, "To what do I owe this honour?" "Now, don't be like that, Millie," said Fred with a large smile.